Well, I'm back. And there was no rejoicing.
Amen.
Thank you. Made me feel better back there. I got to spend last Sunday with a friend of mine in Killeen. He and I have been friends from seminary days. And just to let you, kind of give you an idea of who and what he is, he and I are twins separated at birth by about 4 years of age. So there is another one of me running around out there. So just take that as the blessing or however you wish to take that. But it was a good time to see him, and I finally got to meet his children, which are very similar to my children. So there's another generation of he and I running around out there. So the world is set for a good long time. Genesis chapter 16. Genesis 16, verses 1 through 6. Moses writes for us. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. She had a female servant, Egyptian servant, whose name was Hagar. Sarai said to Abraham, "Behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go unto my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." And Abram listened to Sarai, Abram's wife, and took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And Sarai said to Abram, "May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave you my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me." But Abram said to Sarai, "Behold, your servant is in your power to do to her as you please." Then Sarai dealt harshly with her servant. She fled from her. Those of you who have children and have played with Legos, Lincoln Logs, you go back as far as I do, bristle blocks, models, any toys that say some assembly required, no tools necessary, that you need to go to the garage and get the hammer and the screwdriver and the power drill to put together. Understand that there's two ways to do this. You can either put it together and get it done, and then the child can play with it and have fun, or you can sit down with the child and it will take 10 times as long and the pieces will get lost and you'll finally just give up and let them play with it. Abraham and Sarah, we're just going to jump names here, it's easier, decided that God needed help. He just wasn't moving quick enough. And he just needed help to fix the problem. He was just beyond his control, and so they were going to fix it. And ladies, I apologize ahead of time, but this is much like when we did Genesis chapter 3. We just got to be honest here, because Sarah and Eve have a lot in common. Moses tells us that they had no children, and the one thing that Sarah gets right out of this entire section is that God had prevented her from bearing children. Now, the question will arise, why? Don't know. He just had. That's the best answer I can give you. You say, well, why haven't I got that promotion? Don't know. Why haven't this happened? Why hasn't that happened? Don't know. Sometimes God does things and we don't get an answer. Usually we say there's 3 answers to prayer. Yes, no, and wait. Wait. Now, this was a bigger deal somewhat than it is today, because inheritance was a big deal and you needed children, and God had promised that he would give them children, but he put no time frame on it. That's usually how God operated. With the children of Israel in Egypt, they were told 400 years. With the captivity, told 70 years. But we weren't told how long in Genesis 3:15 before the one who would crush Satan's head would come. We weren't told in Isaiah 7:14 when the virgin would give birth. We weren't given dates. Abraham and Sarah weren't given dates. They were told that it would happen. And that's all that they were told. We've all been told things, well, this will happen. When? Oh, well, it'll happen. It's inevitable. It will take place. but she recognized that God had said that she wouldn't have children, and so Sarah decides that she's going to fix the problem. Now, gentlemen, before you think we're just coming down on Sarah here, we've done the same thing. We're going to fix it. And we're not going to follow the directions. We're just going to do it. Ladies, you've done it too. We've all done it. We're going to get in the middle of this, and we're going to help God out, because it just doesn't make sense. We're going to start this wonderful program, and we're just going to go because, God, you're not doing it the way we want it, and we're going to run headlong into it, and we're going to get about halfway through it and remember, oh, whoops, God, hey, we're doing this. Bless it for us. It happens. So Sarah decides, I've got an idea. I've got a servant. Abraham, I've got a really good idea. We're going to get her to marry you. She's going to be your second wife, and she's going to have kids. But since she's your wife, but she's the second wife and still my servant, her kids will be my kids, and everybody's going to be happy. So let's picture the Abraham household now. You've got a frustrated wife, you've got a servant, and you have Abraham. The frustrated wife tells Abraham, you're going to marry this other woman and have kids, and they're going to be my kids, and we're all going to be happy. Does anybody see the train wreck that's getting ready to happen here? Okay? Do we remember in Genesis chapter 1, or excuse me, chapter 2, let's end the polygamy debate right here. God created Eve for Adam, right? We're all good. Okay? He didn't bring a, what's a safe name of nobody in the room? I'm just going to take it if there's one. Forgive me. He didn't bring a Jill into the picture. There wasn't Adam and Eve and Jill. There was Adam and Eve. If there's a Jill in the room, I apologize. Every single instance in the Bible where there's multiple wives, there are problems. It never works out. Solomon said, and I quote, "My son, don't collect horses or women." This is coming from the man that had 300 wives and 800 girlfriends and thousands of horses. It never works out. That's not the way God had it planned. So, Sarah's first complaint, she attributes barrenness to the God who kept her from having children. She gives Abraham her wife. Abraham listened to Sarah. Just like Adam listened to Eve. Forget what God said. You know, hey, you get off over here. Okay? Abraham listens to Sarah. And he lived in Canaan for 10 years. And Abraham takes Hagar, his Egyptian servant, as his wife. And that sound you hear is the train coming off the tracks. Because God promised. God has promised believers that when either you die or He returns, you will spend eternity with Him. Jesus said, "I come quickly." That was roughly 2,000 years ago. In our humanity's finite minds, does that sound quick? No, it doesn't. Last Wednesday, the world was supposed to end again. I don't know if anybody saw this one, wasn't highly publicized. There's a church that pretty much just meets on the internet. How you have an internet church, I've yet to figure out. But they determined that the world was going to end Wednesday. Unless I missed something, the world did not end on Wednesday. We've tried to help God a lot lately. The world was going to end in 2013. It was going to end a couple years ago in May, and then it was October. We tried to help. God doesn't need your help. God didn't need their help. They're messing up the plan. He takes Hagar, her servant, and she conceives. Everybody should be happy. The child is born. It's a great and wonderful time. The baby is born. Sarah has got what she's wanted. Everything that she ever wanted in life. I mean, this is Christmas morning. Your child has gotten the present that they wanted, and they leave the present in the floor, and they play with the box. So, in theory now, what do we buy our kids for Christmas? The box. She's gotten what she wants. but it doesn't work. There are times when God says no for a reason. It doesn't always make sense, but I will tell you from personal experience, and if anybody wants to know the whole story, I'll share with you later. I can testify that when God says no and you don't understand, trust me, He's smarter than you think. Okay? We'll just leave that one hanging out there for the time being. We messed this whole thing up. Hagar has the child, and when she saw that she'd had the child, she looked with contempt on her mistress. Sarah thought, I'm going to have a kid. This is great. I'm going to take it from Hagar. This is wonderful. My servant's going to be my servant. I'm going to have the baby. Life is going to be wonderful. Hagar has the kid, and all of a sudden now, hey, I'm the wife that produced the kid. You just go over here and do whatever you want. We decide that we're going to answer for God. We're going to do our own thing, and things blow up in our face, and we wonder what's going on. Sarah's second complaint is Sarah considers herself wronged by Hagar. She thinks that the woman she gave to Abraham, her husband, to bear the child, it's her fault. It's not my fault. Officer, yes, do you know how fast you were going? No. Where were you going? And you contemplate, should I say I was going to the hospital because I have a family in the emergency room? And then it runs through your mind, well, what if he follows me? And I don't have family in the emergency room. Yes, I see smiles. Some of you have thought the same thing that I have. And by the way, you all know how fast you were going, and you all know that when you lied to him. Sarah thinks that she's been wrong. We think that we've been wrong. Well, look what they got. I've worked harder for it. I've earned it. How come they got to be first in line? They got in trouble. I'll just go ahead and tell the story. Owen, forgive me. I'm going to tell the story. We ended the first 6 weeks. My son, and I'm going to brag for a moment, so just let me. Made all A's and B's except for one grade in a music class. He got in trouble. Now, when did we find out about it? When we sat down with his teacher. The music teacher did not see fit to call us about it. And evidently there were some other children who were involved in it. And Owen happened to be the one to get the grade. Now, when Owen was asked about it, his response was, anybody want to take a guess at what the child's response was? I don't know. Somebody else did it. The typical children response. And then we had to explain why he didn't get, I don't even know what it was that Catherine got when she got all A's and B's. We want to know why. Allow me a sports analogy. After last night's football game, TCU needs to be number 3 and Baylor needs to be number 2. For those of you who didn't watch football last night, TCU had to win the game in the last 2 minutes over Kansas State, while Baylor absolutely blew Kansas out of the state of Kansas. Will fairness happen? Probably not. We like for it to be fair. I've worked hard. I deserve it. I've earned it. It's not always the way that it works. We were at the fair Friday night. Just to give you maybe a little bit better example. And we were back looking at Romables. Ask how you win. Well, you got a good one. You know you do this, you do that. Yeah, really, what else? You got to know somebody. It's not always fair. Sarah thought it would be fair. She would have Hagar would have the child. She would get the child. Everything would work. Hagar looks at her with contempt, and she all of a sudden thinks that she's better. And so Sarah decides that she's going to be angry. And who does she get angry with? Abraham, because it's his fault. I mean, it's his fault after all. Sarah said, here, do this. Abraham just did what his wife said, and it's all his fault. Just like it was all Adam's fault. Eve said, here, eat the fruit. Adam ate the fruit, and it was all Adam's fault. This is all Abraham's fault. And you know what? It was. He knew better. He was the one that had the conversations with God. He was the one that twice God said, I will give you descendants. He was the one that should have known better. He was the one that should have said, no, this is not the way God said that he was going to do it. She's not my wife. She's the servant. You're my wife, and we're not going to do this. Abraham should have manned up a few verses earlier and said, no, we're not going to do it. But it was easy. We like easy. How many times? I mean, hey, you go down to a convenience store for $1, you buy a lottery ticket, you can win $30 million. Remember when the New York Powerball hit $100 million for the first time and everybody was buying lottery? I mean, hey, for $1 you could win $100 million. Now, granted, the chances of you winning are 1 in 450 million, but hey, you might win it. We like easy. We don't like for it to be hard. Took an anatomy and physiology class in junior college, my first semester. Teacher came in the day before the test. Test is open book, open note. Yes! It's 100 questions and you have 55 minutes. No. For those of you who have not experienced that, you know what open note, open book means. It means I can ask you anything that I want to ask you. Had a theology professor that did this in seminary, and he would ask questions from the captions under the pictures to see if you read that. He would ask questions from the footnotes. For what you thought was easy was not easy. It's difficult. It's difficult to wait. Sarah said to Abraham, may the wrong done to me be on you. Well, Sarah has plenty to be in trouble for with all of this because she wanted to jump the gun. And she is just as much to blame. She's right. Abraham should have known better. Christian, you should know better. And the wrong be done to me, done to you as well. I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. Well, what did you think she was going to do? Oh, hey, here, I've had a kid. Here you go. Take it. Really? That's like winning a $100 million lottery ticket and looking at somebody standing next to you. Here you go. It's not going to happen. We want it easy, and then when you get what you want, number 1 rule in the McCash family, you always get what you pay for. Number 2 rule is, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Rule number 3 is, when in doubt, see rules number 1 and number 2. You know the specials in the newspaper? 2016. Corvette. Yes, I saw it parked out there. $4,000. Today only. And you run down there, you didn't look on the fine print that says we had one 3 months ago that didn't have an engine or transmission or tires. All it was a steering wheel. You get down there, we just sold the last one. But you know what? We have one right over here, and it's $90,000, and it's got more stuff on it. She thought that it was going to be easy. She looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me. And he did. And as Willie so eloquently put it this morning in his prayer, we're still dealing with the mess. Because it's funny. The Arab people descend from Ishmael, this child. And the Jewish people are descendants of Isaac, the one that will come later. Sorry, I didn't mean to ruin the story, but Isaac will show up. And what's even funnier is the Old Testament says that you take care of your family members and you don't kill them. The Quran says you take care of your family members and you don't kill them. And they've been killing each other since Abraham and Sarah messed this whole thing up back in Genesis chapter 16. You say, okay, that's great. How does that apply to us? Well, let me put it to you this way. We're told that as Christians we're to be Christ-like. That's what Christian means. Little Christ. Yet we go out into the world and sadly we somehow, and some people more often than not, we act like those who are lost, and we may be the only Christians people see, and they say, well, see, you're no different than me, so what's the big deal? I had a deacon in the first church I pastored that had season tickets to a Cowboy game. He came up to me the first year, the first football season I was there. He said, I'll be in Sunday school, but after that I'm leaving to go to the game. I've had season tickets for 50 years. Really. Went to his office the next day to see him to ask about something, and one of his partners, he was financial investments guy, Said, I thought you said you were a Christian. I saw you at the football game. I saw you at the Cowboy game. Why weren't you in church? Oh, well, I've been a deacon for 50 years. It doesn't matter. When we act just like the world, how do they know there's anything any different? Abraham and Sarah acted just like everybody else, and they messed up the whole thing. So Abraham decides to punt yet again. Abram said to Sarai, behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her what you please. You're mad at her. You've messed this whole thing up with this. So you know what? She's treated you badly. You do whatever you want to her. All right, folks that got brothers. I'm an only child, so I've got to use some of you as examples, so forgive me. Those of you who have brothers or sisters, older brothers or sisters, your younger one has made you mad. Mom and Dad come in and say, you know what? They made you mad. They're in your hands. You just do whatever you want. How many of you would love for that to have happened? No, Haley, you're good? Okay. You would have all been gracious and kind and said, I forgive you, and you never would have taken advantage of it, would you? And any of you that aren't doing this, we'll talk after church as well. I mean, Abram just sets Hagar up for absolute failure. That is literally letting the inmates run the prison. Here is the father of the faithful. All right? The one that we look to, Abraham, the father of the faithful. He's lied about his wife, technically. She was his half-sister, but lied about his wife. Now has listened to his wife instead of God. Now when the wheels have fallen off this whole thing and his wife is just red in the face, mad, tearing the tent down, you know what? You just deal with her however you see fit. I might be going back to Ur of the Chaldees if I'm Abram, and if I'm Hagar, I'm heading back to Egypt in a hurry. It's a completely wrong answer. Abraham was a believer, and he didn't act like one. Sarah was a believer, and yet then Sarah dealt harshly with her. Hagar does what, with all due respect, I would consider the smart thing. She runs. She's a servant. She's still Abraham's wife, but she's a servant. She could legitimately be put to death, and nobody would think anything of it. We do things and we try to clean it up. And you can't ever clean it all up. One of the tragic stories of our faith was Jim Baker all of those years ago. He went to prison. He did his time. He wrote a book. I was wrong. I actually read the book. I'm thinking, man, God has done amazing things. This guy's great. Right now, he's got a television show where if you send him $50, he'll send you a piece of his tithe that he prayed over. He didn't learn anything. And I don't say that to be for it to sound as bad as it does, but we try to cover up the mess. And when we try to cover it up, we never do. Adam and Eve didn't. God asked Adam, why did you do what I told you not to do? Well, Eve made me do it. Eve, well, the snake made me do it. The snake never got a chance to talk. Here we've got Sarah and Abraham. Well, Sarah, well, God, you made me do it because you didn't let me have kids. Abraham, well, Sarah made me do it. Hagar never gets a chance to talk, and she hits the road. When God says that he's going to do something, here's where all of this goes. Okay, here's where all of this comes back. The third point that's up here, the result of trying to help God, Sarah's choice was no better than Eve's. They all sinned, and then Sarah decides to take it out on the only one who really didn't have an option in all of this. And this all works back to this. You've heard me mention this. You'll hear it again if you'll hit the last slide. Jeremiah 29:11. God knows what he's doing. You don't. We see a period at the end of a sentence of the picture. God sees the whole thing. And God is not slow about keeping his promise. You say, well, it's taking a long time. God says it's taking exactly the amount of time that I said it would. What did Jesus tell the 12 when they asked, He had talked about all of these things that would occur before he returns, and they said, well, when will it happen? Jason, paraphrase, when the Father's ready for it to happen. They say patience is a virtue. Sadly, many of us don't possess that virtue. And those that do, we lose it at times. Abraham and Sarah couldn't wait. They thought that God had forgotten or he was moving too slow, so they were going to fix the problem. And all they did was end up causing a bigger problem. Now, at the end of the day, God keeps his word and everything works out to a degree. But when God says, I'm going to do something, he's going to do it. Jesus tells us that God saves people. He didn't say how many. I'm willing to bet many more than we can conceive of. He said that he forgives because, well, that's what God does. And he said you can't out-sin God. Where did he say that in the Bible? Well, look at the examples. Abraham was a believer. Do you really want to look at the ethics of Abraham right now? He wouldn't be on my, follow the ethics list here. He's a liar. He didn't listen to God. He listened to his wife. We need a little work on that, who we listen to thing. But he learns his lesson because in a few chapters when his son's born and God says go sacrifice him, Abraham's up early the next morning getting it done. So if you're a believer, let me make this clear. God has promised that he will take care of you. It may not be in the way that you think, but it's the way he's planned. And his plans are for our good and his glory. If you're not a believer, let me make this real clear. We've listened to people since since Abraham's day. The world's coming to an end on this date. We don't know. You say, well, I'll wait until I'm on my deathbed. That works real good if you get that opportunity. You may not. You say, well, I've done all of this and I've got to go and fix all of this. No, Jesus never said clean it up and bring it to me. He said bring it to me and I'll clean it up. If you're a believer, don't walk out the door without being saved. You say, well, preacher, I don't know you, but I know this person. Great, go talk to them. There's a room full of believers here that will be thrilled to death to talk to you. I will speak for every single one of them. The point is this. God saves souls. Period. He's done it since Adam and Eve, and he will do it until the very last one saved in the world. And the great thing about God's plan and about salvation is he doesn't need us to fix it. It's perfect. Father, we thank you that your plan is good, that your plan is exactly the way in which you have made it. And even when we try to get into the middle of it, when we try to help, when we try to fix things, when we try to move things along, you are still the God who works out your plan. And we're thankful for that. We ask you that you would grant us the grace to be patient and wait for what you have in store. Lord, we ask you that if there are those in this room who need to be saved this day, that you would not let them walk out without that. For we truly don't know how long we have, and we know that eternity is long. There may be some who you have called to be members of this church. Father, we thank you for that. That there would be those who would want to invest their lives here in Timbercrest, in what is going on, and be a part of your family here. But we ask, more importantly, that in these next few moments, that all that is done would glorify you, and that your kingdom would grow because of it. Father, we thank you for that. It's in your name we pray.